Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay, like I said, we're going to jump right off into the last chapter of Daniel. And wow, Carlos is back. That's great. Good to have you with us, Carlos. So I'm going to go ahead and read this. I've discovered in the last week or two that a lot of people actually get on the class, some on telephones and other ways that it doesn't show up as an attendee. So if you're on the telephone, you don't get the slides. So I'm going to go ahead and read those. Daniel 12:1. At that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress such as never occurred since the beginning of the nation until then. But at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be delivered. Now, when you look at these verses here, remember that the idea of chapters and verses were not, there weren't any chapters or verses until, I don't know, about much later. It was like in the 1400s or something like that when somebody came up with chapters and verses to make it easier to find when they were printing things in the books. So what I'm saying is that this verse here, chapter Daniel 12:1, refers back to the final part of Daniel 11, which was 45, 36 to 45, which was talking about the end times with the Antichrist. Now, it's kind of interesting that when early on, I think I've said several times that when people do when they do translations of the Bible and they read the Bible, everyone has a unique bias that is based on their experience and where their own particular religious view is. And it's kind of interesting in that, like last week we were talking about the verses 36 to 45 of chapter 11, and that would refer to the Antichrist. And then some people said, well, no, that refers to Antiochus Epiphanes and so on. But I was reading some stuff this last week about that was from a classic Jewish point of view. And when I say classic Jewish, I'm talking about the orthodoxy Jewish point of view, where these writers, the commentators, are some of the more classic names, Maimonides, Rambam, even Ezra. Just it goes on and on and on with some of the ancient commentators. That their view, many of them, their view was that this verse, these verses, that we talk about being the Antichrist, they referred to that. No, that what that referred to is it would be Emperor Constantine, who just basically tried to destroy Judaism and elevated the Christian church as the religion of the empire. So it was quite interesting to see their point of view on what we talk about, the Antichrist. And I guess you could say that what they thought of it was not the Antichrist, it was the anti-Judaism person of Constantine. And that just goes to show you how that you need to understand the background, the bias, I guess, of the person that is doing the translation or the speaking. And I'm not saying that bias is necessarily a bad connotation. It's just that that's their frame of reference. That's where they come from in doing their translation or their comments on something. So Alan had asked here, was it the 70 AD event that some said was the fulfillment of this prophecy? There were also some that said that the destruction of the temple, that's what they're talking about here. But it doesn't quite, yeah, some people did say that Daniel was prophesying the destruction of the temple. However, it just doesn't, the numbers don't follow through with, Antiochus Epiphanes being back at 165, 166 BCE, as when he went and put in the statue of Zeus in the temple and sacrificed pigs and so on and so forth. So that was an event well beyond that, before that. And also in Matthew, the 24th chapter, I believe it is, Yeshua was talking about the abomination of desolation as a future event. So that would necessarily make it future to the Antiochus Epiphanes. Carlos asks, was that dispensationalism? It follows in with that, of course, the dispensationalism being that the theory, the idea that the world is divided up into different dispensations or different time frames, different eras that are basically describing events in God's story here, from the creation to the flood as one dispensation, from the flood to say Abraham or the Torah. Off the top of my head, I don't remember all of the different dispensations, but there's some people that would view this event in 70 AD as one of the ends of dispensation, or somewhere around that time, the time of Yeshua and his sacrifice. That would be the end of one dispensation of, say, Judaism, and then the next dispensation then begins with the church. And then the problem with that is dispensationalism a lot of times is also replacement theology. When you see somebody that's really into the dispensation theory, that they are what they really are saying is that, when Yeshua or Jesus came along and he had his he was sacrificed and rose again, well, then that was the end of the law. And so now we're not under the law. And not only that, but God's chosen people, because they did not accept Yeshua, then they are no longer God's chosen people. And then it's the church that's God's chosen people, the Christian church. Of course, personally, I reject that, and because God still has his chosen people, and the church is not it. Its chosen people are still the Jewish people. The church has a place in the end. The believers of Yeshua have a place in the end time economy. But the idea that the Jews and Israel is no longer a part of God's plan is it's erroneous, and we could spend a lot of time and I could show you where that is an error. But
how is that? They say that the Gentile believers are part of the Commonwealth.
Okay, yeah. Pat is asking me. Okay, where does the Gentile believers come in? This is the idea of being grafted into the vine of Yeshua, and what she's talking about there is that when a person becomes a believer in Yeshua, that does not make him Jewish, as some people are teaching today, that if you become a believer, then you must be part of the lost tribes of Israel, and that you're really Israel and you're really Jewish. But the thing is, God does not change your DNA, and you are not Jewish, you are not Israel. If you're a Gentile, you're a believer in Yeshua. So that makes you a special person. It makes you part of what we would call the Commonwealth of Israel. That would be similar to saying, you've got. Let's look at the British Empire, the British Commonwealth, I guess you would say. If you've got a person that is from Canada, he is Canadian, but he is also part of the British Commonwealth. But he's not British. He's part of the British Commonwealth, but he is not an Englishman. He's not a Brit. Let's go on here with what we're trying to finish out tonight. All right. That at that time, the words "at that time" goes back to the time frame of 1136 to 45. It's not this exact time, but it's more like an era, more like like when Yeshua was talking about and after that will become the tribulation. So this at that time, he's talking about a future event for Daniel, and we believe that future event is the end times events that are going to be taking place. They're still future to us. Michael is the archangel associated with spiritual battle. He is, you see him in Daniel 10 and 10:13, Daniel 10:21, Jude 1 and 9, Revelation 12:7. And since also Daniel is called the archangel, I wanted to point out that that's in Jude 1 and 9, that Michael, the archangel, is the opposite of Satan. Now, to say that Satan or the devil is the opposite of Yeshua or Jesus is to elevate Satan to a level that he does not belong. He was an angel. He was a created being, and he was just like Michael, the archangel, and yet he sinned, so he never was deity as such. So to put the devil and Yeshua, Jesus, on the same level is to elevate the devil and maybe somehow denigrate the position of Yeshua. So Satan, while he may be supernatural because he's an angel of darkness, he is not deity. Yeshua is deity. And so that, I think here's just a good time to kind of bring that out, that Michael and Satan are on the same level. One the evil archangel, evil archangel, because he was an archangel. The evil, and then Michael being the good. It's almost like, when you see in the cartoons where a person's trying to decide whether to do good or do bad, and they got the little angels on each shoulder. Okay, it's Michael and Satan. It's not Yeshua and Satan. Okay, so Yeshua's way up above here. And in fact, at one point, Michael even talked about when he deals with Satan, he just says, look, I just say, the Lord rebuke you. He doesn't even mess with him. So, and Michael is, he's appointed as the spiritual guardian of Israel. And we see that earlier in Daniel too, where Daniel also, where Michael is spoken of as the one who watches over. His assignment, as it were, is the nation and the people of Israel. Now, there was I was reading one book this week that they're talking about here, that the Michael, when it talks about Michael, that they're really talking about that Michael is Yeshua, that it's not the archangel, it's just a theophany, or it's Yeshua. But I reject that, because what does the Bible say? What does it say? It says Michael, an angel. It didn't say Yeshua. So again, when we go into the Bible, the first step is, what does it say, literally, and then from there, you do your interpretation. But it says Michael, the archangel. So it's not Michael, but it's really Jesus, or really Yeshua. It's Michael. So, all right, let's go on. Now, talking about here, it says there will be a time of distress or time of trouble. It's never occurred. Okay, this is what we're going to be calling, we call the Great Tribulation. That's what's coming up someday. And it's also in I think Jeremiah, it's called the Jeremiah 30:7, I believe. It's called the time of Jacob's trouble. Now, the Jewish people, this time that we're talking about here, this Great Tribulation time, this will be unique in all history. Now, there will never has been a trouble like this that has occurred, or and never will again. I mean, this is going to be unique in all history, and so this is the Jewish people. They've known many times of trouble. That we could say throughout their history, from the horrors of the fall of Samaria and Jerusalem. With the different exiles, because the Assyrians. These guys were so brutal. They made ISIS look like pikers. They were really terrorists, and that's the way they conquered, was by the terrorism. So that was a horror for Israel when Samaria fell, the northern tribes, and then Jerusalem, of course, fell to the Babylonians, and then later on, this in 165, this era of Antiochus Epiphanes, and again, Antiochus Epiphanes was one of those guys that he was especially cruel to the Jewish people, and we could go in and describe some of it. I don't want to take that much time, but it just let's just say that he made circumcision a death penalty, and that his treatment of the mothers and the sons who were circumcised was extremely savage. We'll just leave it at that. So then the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans, there again, that was awful. You read the story of Masada, and then that was 897 people or something like that were killed at Masada. But there were other places that were in Israel where they surrounded villages or towns and so forth, and they killed in one city alone, they killed the entire population. Over 10,000 people died. Basically, they jumped off a cliff rather than submit to the Romans. So there again, that's a time of trouble. The the persecutions from the church during the Dark Ages. My goodness, some of that was just absolutely savage. Again, inhumane. And then the pogroms of Europe, and then finally the Holocaust in World War II. Any one of those would be, times of Jacob's trouble. But as terrible as those were, this time it's going to be much, much worse. I mean, it's just going to be so horrible that it's hard to even contemplate it. Yeshua quoted this passage in Matthew 24:21. Says, "For then there will be great trouble, such as not happened since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be." But with great sadness, we have to say that the Bible teaches that the worst is yet to come for the Jewish people. I mean, it's just coming. This phrase, the Great Tribulation, it establishes its connection with the final or Great Tribulation above mentioned. For there can manifestly be only one time of trouble, this Great Tribulation. So these other things were, they were bad, they were tribulation, but this one that's coming, it's going to be like it never will be again. If you look at Revelation 12, 13, and 17, I'll go ahead and read that. "Now, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he stalked the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of the great eagle so that she may fly away from the presence of the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is taken care of for a time, times, and half a time." Okay? Keep that in mind. A time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. "And from out of his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river after the woman in order to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the aid of the woman. The earth opened up its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had spewed from its mouth." So the dragon became enraged at the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her offspring. Those who keep the commandments, the offspring being those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Yeshua. So that's talking about the end time, where Satan is going to be making war against not only Israel, the woman, but all of her offspring. Which, okay, who's the offspring? We are. The Jewish people are offspring. The people who are believers in Yeshua are the spiritual offspring. That's what in Genesis, where God told Abraham, he says, you're going to be the father of many nations, and every family, every nation, tribe, everybody in the world will be blessed through you, talking about the concept of Yeshua coming and sacrificing his life. And then that way, everyone in the world has the opportunity then to be part of this plan of salvation, or being part of what, being able to have right standing before God, like the Jewish people had the opportunity to have right standing before God. So this part in Revelation says that this is so terrible. It describes the fury of the devil directed against the Jewish people during this time. All of the, if you read in the Revelation, the trumpets, the seals, the bowls of Revelation, all describe the horrific conditions of the world in general during this time. Jewish people will be targets of the full fury of the devil and his Antichrist during this period, and will live in a world that is in incredible upheaval because of the judgment of God. It's just going to be terrible. But the devil has always targeted God's people. Why? Because it was through the Jews that God's plan of salvation would be completed. Therefore, if Satan could destroy the Jews, then he could destroy God's plan for mankind. If he could destroy all of the Jewish people, like in Egypt or wherever, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, Haman in Persia, if he could destroy the Jewish people, then that promised seed, the Messiah, could not come if the people had been wiped out. So that's why, Satan has over the years and all, through the eons of history, had tried to destroy the Jewish people. But it says, but at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be delivered. So the good news is that no matter what Satan may throw at Israel, she will survive. Just like the Jews, we've always survived. And God promised their survival to Abraham in Genesis 17:7. Said, I will establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant in order to be your God and your seed's God after you. So basically, God is saying, Israel is going to survive, and that if Israel is going to survive, then the spiritual seed of Israel and of Abraham are also going to survive. We will, as a people, will survive. Now, I'm not saying that nobody's going to be killed. Certainly, the Bible talks about how the blood of the saints that were martyred will cry out for vengeance and for restitution. But as a whole, Satan will not win. The good guys win. So keep that in mind. There's also another promise here in Romans 11:25 and 27. Let's see here. It says, for I do not want you, brothers and sisters, to be ignorant of this mystery, lest you be wise in your own eyes. Put that a partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way all Israel will be saved, as it is written, the deliverer shall come out of Zion, he shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. So Paul is reiterating the idea that Israel as a whole, as an entity, as a nation, as a people group, they will be saved, but they're still going to have to be saved through believing that Yeshua is the Messiah. They do not get a get out of jail free card by just saying, well, I'm Jewish, so therefore I'm a chosen one, so I get to, I'm going to survive, and it just doesn't work that way, because Yeshua himself said, no man comes to the Father but by me. So then, let's go on. The angel then turns to the idea of the resurrection. He says, Daniel 12:2, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. This reference to those who sleep indicates actual physical bodies, not the government or political entity called Israel. Also, this idea says multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth. There are people who say that, okay, that when you die, you don't really you don't go to heaven. You're just in soul sleep, because it talks about sleep. I don't believe that. I believe that when they're talking about when they're talking about sleeping here, it's just a nice saying that that a person has died. We use different words today. Like said, well, someone has passed away, or if you're real nautical, you'll say, well, they crossed the bar. If you're it's a whole lot nicer to say, yeah, someone passed away. They've gone on to their eternal reward, rather than saying, yeah, the old codger croaked and he's gone, he's dead. That's, it's nicer to say, that someone has passed on. And so the idea that, they sleep in the dust of the earth, well, that's a nicer way to say than, yep, he's dead. So anyway, the Bible clearly teaches that there are two resurrections, one for the saved and one for the damned. Now that's we can look at that. That's in John 5:29 is just one of the references. Those who have done good will come to a resurrection of life, and those who have done evil will come to a resurrection of judgment. Revelation 20 and 24 through 6, it says, "Then I saw thrones, and people sat on them. Those to whom authority to judge was given, and I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony for Yeshua and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or his image, nor had they received his mark on their forehead or on their hand, and they came to life and reigned with the Messiah for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were completed." This is the first resurrection. The first resurrection is the resurrection of the saints. And it goes on to say, "How fortunate and holy is the one who has a share in this first resurrection. Over such the second death has no authority, but they shall be Kohanim, they shall be priests of God and the Messiah, and they shall reign with him for 1,000 years." So, if people really did believe that your soul is going to live forever, it's going to exist forever, if they could really get a hold of that, that'd probably make a big change in their lives, maybe. So it talks about here, says one of the words in one of the translations is talk about everlasting contempt. I think that's what we had. Yeah, in Daniel 12:2, it says, "Others to shame and everlasting contempt." The terror of hell never ends. Okay, there is not a blissful annihilation for some, after some period of punishment. This passage denies a rising doctrine within the church, a modified annihilationism, I guess is what it's being called, that teaches that unjustified sinners are sent to hell and they suffer torment for a while, but then their beings perish for eternity. This is something that people are teaching nowadays, that it kind of makes them feel a little bit better maybe about their loved ones that never accepted Yeshua, that okay, well, yeah, okay, they're going to go to punishment for a little while, but eventually their whole being, it ceases to exist, and then it was as if they never were. So they're not going to be in eternal punishment. But the Bible doesn't describe it that way. If you look at Revelation 20:10, describes eternal punishment for the devil and the Antichrist. This is there would be no way possible in the Greek language. This is a guy named Wolford, who is a commentator, says there's no way possible in the Greek language to state more emphatically the everlasting punishment of the lost than here in mentioning both day and night and the expression forever and ever, literally from ages to ages, and so it's kind of like you have to sometimes just get in somebody's face and say, what part of forever don't you understand? It's forever. And so logically, hell must be eternal, because if it were imperfect, because it is where imperfect beings must pay a continual penalty for their sins, because they can never make a perfect payment. This is the principle from back in the Old Testament, that they had the animals. That was even though they were flawless, it was not a perfect system, and so they had to do it over and over and over again. It was only the blood of Yeshua that made it a once and for all salvation. So let's go ahead and Daniel 12:3. "Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavenly expanse, and those who turn many to righteousness will be like the stars forever." So despite all the trials, the tribulation of the end times, there will still be those who shine through. It's no matter what. You read stories in the Holocaust of people how terrible it was, and yet there were still people that they shined through, and they made it, or they saved other people's lives. There's still people that will shine. And then it says, those that turn many to a righteousness will be like the stars forever and ever. So, there still will be opportunities for people to get saved during this tribulation time, because it says, if you turn people to righteousness, if you're talking to people and you convert them and they become righteous, then it says people who do that will shine like the stars forever and ever. Again, that's one of those deals of eternal life forever and ever. Amen. So all God's people are like stars in the sense that they radiate light and help others to see and find their way. But those who actually turn many to righteousness will shine even brighter. Your reward in heaven will be greater, and we know that there are levels of reward in heaven. This promise applies to all of the wise, all of those who turn many to righteousness through the ages, but it may have its specific application to the 144,000 evangelists from Israel's tribes during the tribulation time. That's in Revelation 7. We'll get into that later on when we get more into Revelation. Again, this idea of forever and ever, it's the brightness of God's wise ones and those who turn many to righteousness will last forever. It isn't fading, it endures, which when so many other things that we put our effort in, they'll succeed, but they're only a temporary shine. It's worth it to invest our lives into the things that last forever and ever. So what do we invest our lives in? Trying to win others to Yeshua. Going on, Daniel 12 and 4. But you, Daniel, close up the words and seal the book until the end of the time of the end. Many will run back and forth, and knowledge will increase. Now, this part here, where it says, close up the words, seal the book. Daniel is, at this point, there's so many things in Daniel that were unknown to him. So he didn't know exactly, he didn't know that there was going to be a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes. But as time has rolled on, more and more things in the book of Daniel have come to knowledge, and people understand what it meant. Now, and this part here is where it says, many will run back and forth, and knowledge will increase. That, to me, could possibly mean, it's not like, what are we talking about? People traveling all over the world and going here and there and so forth. Maybe let's just consider that, or perhaps it means that people are searching Daniel from start to finish. And certainly, there's more and more and more study being done of the prophetic books. And because that the people are studying it in a different light, and maybe they've opened their minds to it, then the knowledge will increase. And so we certainly I think we've got a better understanding of Daniel now than perhaps we did. Certainly within the last 150 years, there has been just a ton of literature written on the book of Daniel. I'm going to stop just now and see if there's anyone that has a question on this or a comment. I know the Daniel 5 through 7. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood there, one on this side of the bank of the river, and on the other bank of the river. One said to the man clothed in linen. Remember, going back to Daniel chapter 10, there was one who was standing in the middle of the river. Okay, and it was it was a theophany. It was maybe a Christophany, a picture of Yeshua. One said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long until the end of the wondrous things. Wondrous does not necessarily mean wonderful. It means things that are, oh, wow, awful. These things that they just make you wonder. He said, then I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the river as he raised both his right and his left hands toward heaven and swore an oath by him who lives forever, saying, it is for a time, times and a half. Then when the breaking of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things will be finished. A time, times, and half a time. We talked about that earlier in this lesson. This is 3.5 year period, okay? And there's several references to this. Daniel 7:25 talks about it's described as a period that the saints are given into the Antichrist hands. Okay, that's it's a time where there's going to be some hard times. Daniel 9:27. It's a period between the breaking of Antichrist's covenant with Israel in the middle of the tribulation, and then and that erection of the abomination of desolation, whatever that's going to be, whatever that's going to look like. And then the establishment of Yeshua's kingdom at the end of the Great Tribulation and the beginning of the millennium, 1,000 years. And Daniel 12:7, which we haven't got to describe it as the duration of the time of trouble for Israel. It's also in Revelation 11:2, this a 3.5 year period is described as the period that the holy city will be tread underfoot by Gentiles. So conquerors, somebody's going to come in and they will take over Jerusalem for 3.5 years. So if you see that an army invades and occupies Israel, mark it down if you're still alive and you see it coming, because that's the beginning of the tribulation. You have to have a temple built and in functioning and in working order for the tribulation to begin. So we're not there yet, but it could be very close with today's construction techniques. They could put up a temple that is functional pretty quickly. Revelation 11:3 described as a period of ministry for the two witnesses. Remember that there will be two witnesses. Some people say that it would be Elijah and Enoch, because neither one of those guys died, and the Bible says that it's appointed unto man once to die. That everybody has to die once, and so a lot of people say, well, these are going to be Enoch and Elijah. I don't know, but they will be ministering for 3.5 years, and then they will be killed, and then they'll have a miraculous resurrection. I'm not giving away anything, I don't think, on that. Revelation 12:6 and 12, or 12:6 and 12:14 described it, this 3.5 year period, as the period that and maybe it's only a remnant that is preserved by God in the wilderness. So there will be, Israel will be preserved somewhere out there in the wilderness. And what that's going to look like, who knows? It's a vast wilderness out there, but there's a whole lot of people too in Israel. So we'll just have to see how that works. Revelation 13:5 describe this 3.5 year period as the duration of Antichrist's authority to rule, persecute, and blaspheme. So that, again, is part of this tribulation time frame. Now, going into Daniel 12:8, says, now I heard, but I didn't understand. So I said, my Lord, what will be the outcome of these things? And so even Daniel, with all of his study, and what a great man, how he knew the scriptures and so forth, and how he prayed, even he was perplexed by some of this stuff and the timing and so forth. So I don't feel too bad about looking at this stuff and scratching my head, and some of these things that are just things that make you want to go, huh? So I don't feel too bad about that. Let's go ahead and finish off here. Daniel the 9th through the 13th. It says, then go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the end of time. Many will be purified, made spotless, and refined by the wicked, but the wicked will act wickedly. None of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand. From the time that the daily burnt offerings is taken away and abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. That is 3.5 years. Happy is the one who keeps waiting and reaches the 1,335 days. But you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of days, you will arise to receive your portion. He's saying, go ahead, Daniel. You're already an old man. Don't worry about this stuff too much. Just go back to your business and just get into your daily routine, because at the end of days, you're going to come to your end. You will rest. You will have your time off. But then at the end of days, you will rise again. You're going to be resurrected. Now, and we see that these detailed meanings of Daniel, they're sealed until the end time. We don't know exactly how a lot of this stuff is going to play out. That there's so many theories out there as to who's the Antichrist and who's the beast and who is Babylon or what is Babylon and all those kind of things, trying to identify all of these things. But one of the things I wanted to point out here, where it does talk about many will be purified. Now, made spotless and refined. How do you become purified, spotless and refined? A lot of times things that are purified, it's by fire. It's by heating up. If you're going to refine, say petroleum, if you're going to refine petroleum, it takes heat to heat the stuff up, and then you put it in cracking towers, and then the various distillates come off at different temperatures and pressures. But it's by fire. If you're going to take silver or gold, you don't stick it in a freezer. No, you stick it in a melting pot, and then all of the impurities come to the top. You skim the impurities off the top. So what he's saying here is that this time of tribulation is going to be a time of testing. It's going to be a time that people are going to really be tested as to their resolve in following Yeshua. So those that we could call the C and E Christians, the Christmas and Easter Christians, they're probably going to be in trouble, because how are they going to stand up to all of this tribulation if they're not grounded in the Word and they have a habit of prayer and following the Lord. So that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to make sure that people get out of this whole thing, these last few verses, is that it's going to be tough, but it's the refiner's fire, and it's by going through this, you will come out on the other end. It's in a small measure, it would we could say that it's kind of like going into the military and going through boot camp. That 10 weeks of boot camp, and you go in maybe a skinny 90-pound weakling, but at the end of it, you come out a lean, mean fight machine. And so I think at the end of all this, that's why the Bible says, happy is the one who keeps waiting and reaches the 1,335 days. Now, what's the difference between these 1,290 days, which is actually 3.5 years, and 1,335 days? Perhaps what that is would be 45 days. It's a month and a half from the time that that Satan is defeated until then. There's a transition period, and there's a time where Yeshua's earthly reign in Jerusalem, the millennium, begins, and he's set up his government. Because those kind of things don't happen overnight, and perhaps that's what it is. I don't really know, but it could be something like that. But there's places in the Bible where it says that those who endure to the end will be saved, and so it's something that endure, it just calls to mind that something is kind of tough. You don't endure something that is pleasant and that makes you feel good. You endure something that is perhaps unpleasant, doesn't make you feel good. It's tough. It makes you sweat. It makes you dirty. It's just something that you don't really want to go through and keep repeating and repeating, but you have to stay with it, and the word is endure. And so the Bible tells us that the ones that endure to the end, stay with it, don't give up, and don't renounce your faith in Yeshua. Those people will be saved. So I'd like to say a lot of people today are saying, well, and I've had pastors and so forth. Well, I don't really worry too much about Revelation because we're not going to be here anyway, and we're just going to be raptured out at the beginning, and all those troubles we don't have to worry about. Well, I read the Bible differently, and I do believe that we will be going through the tribulation, but God is able. Remember that he kept the people of Israel, the Hebrews, he kept them safe in the land of Goshen, which is a part of Israel, part of Egypt. And when the plagues were going on in Egypt, none of that stuff was happening to the folks in Goshen, none of the Hebrews. And so the Egyptians could see the difference that it made by not being under God's protection. So I think we'll still be seeing a large measure of God's protection even through the tribulation. All right, that is the end of Daniel, and there was the notes as to what the 1,290 days. There's one, one of the prophecies that would be 1,260 days, and that's 3.5 years. Yeshua returns, defeats Satan at Armageddon. 1,290 days, the millennial government installed, but then the 1,335 days. That's what is that that the nations then will be judged. So. We don't know what these numbers are. A lot of this is just speculation. So that's why I don't get really wound up about it. That it is what it's going to be. It's not it is what it is. It is what it's going to be. And so the Bible says, happy is the one that stays with it till the end. So hopefully we're going to be one of the happy ones that will stay with it till the end. So anyway, all right, that is the end of the lesson. Let me go ahead